Hi everyone, I'm Jodi Barrows with the Square in a Square, and I'm so excited to share with you a brand new option of the Square in a Square system, and that option is option 41, the snowball block. You can see behind me two quilts that have used the snowball block to make the beautiful triangles that come together. You can see where four of those come together, where the blocks come together, and that is the snowball block. It's very easy to make. We have a brochure that you can order that will give you a pattern, and it will give you multiple block sizes and also give you multiple ideas and how to use the scraps or the trim offs or the leftovers from the option. So a lot of jam-packed information in this quick video on option 41, the snowball block. So let's get started. The first thing you do is you make a basic square, and that's what we do with any option of the Square in a Square system. You have a square in the middle and you have strips on the side. And if you're normally using the Square in a Square system, this one may look a little bit different because the width of the strips are thinner than what we normally do. Usually they're wider and more in proportion to the size of the square. But to make the option 41 block, the snowball here, we just need these triangles in the corner so we don't have to have all of that width. Now when you're following the charts or the patterns, we're going to tell you exactly what sizes of squares and strips to use. And the snowball block is really very easy to make. We're going to trim all four corners, leaving the 1/4 of an inch, and that's just like the option 1. So I'm going to use the grande ruler, and I'm going to put the tip of the blue lines right in the corner or the tip of that fabric square. Those lines line up right over the seam, and it's going to leave a perfect 1/4 of an inch right off of that fabric corner. So we're just going to turn it and do all four corners just like an option 1, leaving the 1/4 of an inch. Now with each cut, as you go around, look to where you've already cut and make sure that your block is staying square with those grid lines on the ruler. So all four sides, leave the 1/4 of an inch and make sure you're staying square. And that's the first step to creating the option 41 snowball block. Now when you have all four corners done, because we had the width of the strip thinner, you can see how we don't have the fabric coming all the way out here. And that's good, that's okay, that's what we want, because we don't need as much when we get down to the final results of just this little fabric triangle unit in the corner. Now, with each size that you're doing, your charts and your instructions will have a snowball block that is a 3-inch sewn, a 6-inch, a 9, and a 12. So this next step, depending on what size you're making, you'll have to look at your charts to see how much you cut off for the next step. Now this one here that I'm working on is the 9-inch snowball block, like you see here. So the amount that I'm going to take off of each corner to create these fabrics, triangles in the corner, is only for this size. So you'll have to look at your charts to see what it is for a 3, a 6, a 9, or a 12. Now for this one, what I need is 1.5 inches. So I'm going to use my grande ruler, and you can use either side that you want, whichever one is easier for you to read. And I'm going to come in here and measure 1.5 inches off of the same corner where we had our 1/4 inch trim. So here I have measured off 1.5 inches off of that 1/4 of an inch trim. And I'm going to come in here and trim that off. And you can see how we're starting to create the blunted area here, which you see here, and a triangle unit of the strip color in the corner. So just keep going around. Doing all four corners and doing the appropriate width that you're trimming off. And your chart will tell you that when you get to your charts. And just that easy, you have the snowball block. Now when you look at the snowball block and you look at it in proportion of how you build blocks, it is basically a 9-patch setting. So that means that you have 3 rows that are equal if you're working with it on graph paper. So this would be 1 row, and this section would be equal to this section, and the corner sections would be equal to the center section. So that's one reason why in the charts and in your option book is that's one reason why we have the 3-inch, the 6, and the 9 and the 12, is because all 3 of these sections in the top row and in your middle row and then in your last row, they all have to work out to be the same, which means we also have to work out where we trim so that when we come back in and sew, our seam allowances and our points are right exactly where they need to be. So it's not that you can't make a snowball block any size, it's just that if you're thinking about like a 5-inch or whatever, the increments can get kind of crazy to work with. And I only put the numbers in my charts and patterns for sizes for numbers that are easy to work with. Now, when you get your booklet, this is kind of a mock-up. We don't have the actual printed ones yet. They'll be here any day. But you'll have a picture of the quilt, and then you're going to have a little bit of the history. And then it comes in to tell you about the trimming of the option 1, like I've already done. And then it's going to give you the snowball chart. And it tells you that you can have a 3, a 6, a 9, or a 12 sewn. So that means cut with raw edges, it will be a 3.5, a 6.5, a 9.5, and a 12.5. So anytime you're working on building a pattern or using charts, it's important to know the difference between the sewn sizes and the cut sizes. So the very first column, it says the sewn block. So that's the sewn block of the option 41 snowball that you're looking for. The next one is going to tell you the cut size of the block. So if it's a 3-inch sewn, it's going to be a 3.5 cut. Now the next 3 columns gives you the sizes that you need when you start trying to create your option 41 snowball. So the first one is going to give you, it says cut center square. The next one is going to give you the width of the strips that you sew around. And the next one is going to give you the measurement that you trim off when you get over here to do this extra little trim off. So that's how you read the chart to get what you want. Then when we get to the next parts of the pattern, it's of the 41 snowball, we're going to tell you and give you ideas of how to use these leftover pieces and these leftover pieces. But before we get to that, let's finish up with our snowball block. Now, anytime you have a snowball block, when you put 4 snowball blocks together, you're going to get 4 triangles that come together if you sew them right together. Now, you can do them just like this and not worry about putting anything in the middle, or you can do a regular applique with your cotton fabrics. You can do a wool applique, or you can do any of the paper piecing, which you can use a hexagon or a diamond or these little Dresdens. And that's what I did on this particular one, is I used the little, I think it's a 5 3/4 inch Dresden that I put here in the middle. And let's look at the quilt up here behind me at what we did. And this is your main pattern for the option 41, and this pattern will come inside your booklet for the option 41 snowball. So we did 5 in a row, and we did 5 rows, and these happen to be the 9-inch size that we used. And I thought maybe it was a little bit plain, and so I wanted to do some of the English paper piecing with the Dresden plates, and I did every other block on the top and bottom, and then in the middle I just did the 2, and then in the very middle I did 1. Now if you want to, you can go back in and put 1 here and here, and it's every row is a 3 or a 2 or a 3 or a 2. You can do it however you want. And you can applique your pieces in when it's in the block form, like you see here, or you can put your whole quilt together and then go in and applique your pieces. Just kind of depends on how you want to work. There's no right or wrong way to do your appliques or when that you do them. A smaller block is a little bit easier to work with and turn in your hand, but this particular quilt isn't so big that it's difficult to get into the middle of your quilt to do your applique. Let's look at a couple of other quilts where we've used the snowball block, the option 41. So in this particular one here, you can see how we've done another Dresden, kind of a heart-shaped one, and then the heart in the middle. And you can see how the four corners come together again. So you maybe wouldn't look at this quilt and the original one and think that they were the same, but they both have a lot in common. Now, Sister's Choice is also a great one to do with option 41. And so you're going to make your option 41, and then you're just going to make a 9 patch the same size as your option 41. So in looking at this quilt, you can see the 9 patch sections here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So if I was using my 9-inch option 41, then I would make sure that this would be a 9-inch sewn or 9.5 cut. So you would divide 3 into your 9, and that would get your sizes for your 9 patch. Now you can also go into the Square and a Square reference book. There's a chart there for 9 patches, or if you have the 9 patch ruler, there's a chart in there to help you with your square size or your strip size so that you can get those 9 patches. So in this particular quilt, it's set together a little bit differently, but you can get the same look with the option 41 snowball and a 9 patch. So let's look at how that 41 comes in with the 9 patches. So here are the 9 patch here, and then when you look here, here is your snowball block. So you would kind of need to, this one is obviously scrappy, but it is coordinated, so you would need to pay attention to your colors that you put on the side of your option 41 center square so that your colors would turn out where you want them to be. But here is your snowball block, and here are 9 patches. So you would just sew them together in rows, and the row above it and below it, you would alternate other pieces. And this one is separated with this beautiful little Milky Way star. And if you did a 9 patch and an option 1, they would all come together, and you wouldn't have the sashing or the setting or the cornerstone, and actually have a quilt that's really very beautiful and not as much work or intricate pieces as what you see here in this particular design. So a 9 patch, option 41, 9 patch, option 41, 9 patch. Great way to get in and use up your scraps and make a beautiful traditional quilt. Now let's look at some other pieces that you're going to have and what you can do with them from your snowball block. I like to be able to go in and use up everything that I have left over. And in the process of making the original quilt from these fabrics, I wound up with just minute little pieces that I trashed because I went in and used everything. So these were my pieces here that I had left over from the original trim off, like you see here. And you can use them to make a basic square. So you can see here that these are just the little scrappy pieces that we put on the side. Now, all of my samples I made using the 9-inch center square. So that means that these are the sizes I got off of all of mine that I did. And I used my option charts in my book 1 of my reference books. So it's really easy to go in to your charts that start on page 34. And I looked at the width of my trim off. So I took my little ruler and I laid it on here, and most of my trim offs were right around 2 inches from the side where I would put it on my square to the outside corner. So if these were 2 inches, then I can go into any of my charts from my reference book, and I can look at the column that has the width of the surround strip, and I can find that 2-inch size, and it will give me a center square. So with my little trim offs, I decided to use a 2.5-inch center square. So I went just into my scraps that I had left over from my bulk fabric, and I made my 2.5-inch center square, and then I put these on the side. And you can see how they're just, you know, all funky in the way that they trim off. Now sometimes you have this little strip, this little seam that goes through. I don't worry about it until I get my block all trimmed up, and then if I need to take those out, I will. But when I come in here and trim this into a flying goose or an option 1, that part may not even show up in the actual part. It may be in the little trim offs. So you can see here how I've just used them, and however, whatever the funkiness of that little scrap is how it gets put on. And then once you have these basic squares, you can turn them into anything you want, whether it's option 1s, square and a square, option 3, flying geese. And let's just go ahead and trim one of these up. And I'm going to use my mini. And if I want to trim it into an option 1, a basic square, then of course I just leave that 1/4 of an inch. So you can see I had plenty of fabric. And these can go in another quilt. You can use them as the border on your little Dresden plate applique quilt. You can go in and make anything you want with these. These are also, you need a lot of these for the prairie cloth quilt, so you could have some ready to go. So from my little scrappy trim offs, I make a basic square with them and then go in and trim it up however I need to for the next project or border that I want to make. And of course everything starts out this way, so most any option can be made from these. I can even sew around it again to help it to grow and turn it into one of the options that are, you know, option 9 and up. So it's really limited only to your own imagination of how you want to go in and use up your little basic squares. Now the other thing that you're going to have left over are these pieces right here. And if you want to go in and trim them up, you'll need to make sure that it's the same width from the nose of the goose to the edge where you're going to cut. So I think it's really important to make sure you use a ruler that you can see really well. So I went in here with my mini with my little corner square up here, and I want to put a line right on the nose of the goose. And of course this is a good cleanup cut, and this is a good cleanup cut. I don't want to make it any smaller. I just want to trim off the ends and make it as neat as possible. So when I look at my ruler, it's right at 3.5. The nose of my goose is right at 3.5. So make your trim, turn it, and then go back again, and right at the nose of the goose, put the 3.5 again. And then now you know that you have your goose in the center and it's proportioned correctly, and that gives you the width that you have to work with. Now, 2 samples that I have here, and these are also included in your handout for your little booklet for your option 41. You can see how we just took the whole length of it, and that was going to be the size of our quilt, of our little block. Now this one here, these are the trim offs from the 9-inch snowball block, option 41. And for this one, I think these 4 patches were 2.5. So I did a 4 patch that were from 2.5-inch cut. And of course you've got to put this side on first to make your short side here and here. So I would just center it and put it on and then trim it off. And then you have your longer ones that fit on the other 2 sides. And this, I'm pretty sure, is a 6.5 cut block. Yep, this one turned out to be a 6.5 cut, so that's really great. And this one is the same, except we wanted to use as all of the width of our block on each side. So what that means is that our block gets larger and we add the little corner square here. So whatever the width of your strip is here, which happened to be 1.5, then those need to be that needs to be the size of your corner units. So these are actually larger because it was growing, and I'm pretty sure these are 3 3/4. These 4 patches are 3 3/4, and then we put the full strip on the 2 sides, and then we had to sew the corners on the other 2. And you know that I like to use overcut squares so that I can trim them up. So here you can see I put about 2-inch squares on the corner, and then I'll just come in and trim up this inside edge that goes here, and then when my block is complete, I'll come in and trim up the outside edges. So in your handout for your option 41, you're going to have all of those instructions in here to help get you on the road and the patchwork path for beautiful quilts using the option 41 snowball block. I know you're going to enjoy it as much as I have. Here's a bonus idea for the option 41 snowball block that is not in your handout. So down here you can see how we've sewn multiple ones of them together, and I think it's important, of course you're going to have them trimmed off so that it's an even number from the nose of the goose to each side, and when you press, you're going to press towards that next goose, breaking the beak like we always do when you have multiple flying geese together. And this is a great way that you can do a border and just do them in sections and keep putting them together for a border on your quilt. But another thing is that you can actually build a block with these. So here you can see how I have two together, one with the flying geese going in, one with them going up, and you can just do this as a clockwise or counterclockwise. So if this one goes in, this one goes up, this one is going to go in, and this one is going to go down. And then you can see how they all just circle around, and you can build a block just like this with these little leftover trim offs from the option 41 snowball.